The worst moments don't announce themselves. They slip in while you're distracted, convinced you've earned the right to look away. I remember thinking I had everything under control. It was late. Not midnight late, but the kind of late where ambition pretends it's responsibility. My laptop was open, calendar reminders stacked like dominoes, and I was halfway through a call with a client who liked to hear himself talk. The room was quiet except for his voice and the low hum of the air conditioner. I was nodding at the screen, muting myself when I needed to sigh, unmuting when it was time to agree. That's when my phone vibrated. I glanced down. My daughter's name lit up the screen. I hesitated. That hesitation still echoes in my chest. I told myself the same lie I'd been telling for years. 1 minute won't matter. I slid the phone face down and leaned closer to the webcam, smiling like a man who knew exactly where he was going. Then it buzzed again. This time I felt it in my jaw. The tightness. The guilt dressed up as discipline. I apologized to the client, clicked mute, and picked up. Her face filled the screen, slightly pixelated, framed by a room that wasn't mine. She was at her grandparents' house for the weekend, something we'd agreed was safe, familiar, easy. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't her full smile. It was careful. Practiced. "Daddy," she said. "Hey, sweetheart." I softened my voice automatically. "What's up?" She shifted the phone, angling it down, then back up again. I noticed how close she was holding it. Like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "Can you stay on?" she asked. I glanced at the laptop, the blinking mute icon, the client waiting. "Just for a minute," I said. "I'm finishing something important." She nodded. Too quickly. There was noise behind her. A TV somewhere. Footsteps. A door closing. Something in my chest tugged. She kept looking past the screen, eyes flicking to the side, then back to me. I'd seen that look before. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Like she was listening for something she couldn't control. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. The phone slipped. At first, I thought she dropped it. The screen spun, flashed ceiling, wall, a blur of movement. I heard her inhale sharply. Then the sound changed. Voices overlapped. Not shouting yet, but sharp. Close. I leaned forward. Hey, it's okay. Pick it up." Her face flashed back into view, closer now. Her eyes were wide. "Daddy," she said, and her voice broke in a way I'd never heard before. "No, Grandpa, please." The words hit me like cold water. The phone fell again. I heard a scrape. Something bumped. Her breathing turned fast, uneven. A chair leg screeched across the floor. Someone said her name, low, impatient. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward. "Hey!" I shouted at the screen. "Hey, I'm here." "Put the phone down." "I'm right here." Then the screen went black. For a second, I didn't understand what had happened. My brain tried to explain it away. Bad signal. Accident. Kids panic over nothing. Then the call ended. I stared at my own reflection in the dark glass of my phone. I called back immediately. No answer. I called again. Straight to ringing. No pickup. I forgot about the client. Forgot about the meeting. Forgot about everything except the sound of her voice saying please. I paced the room, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hollow sound of unanswered calls. I texted. Nothing. "Are you okay? Call me back. I'm here." Each message felt thinner than the last. I tried to remember the last thing she'd said before the phone slipped. I replayed it over and over, like if I analyzed it hard enough, it would change. "No, Grandpa, please. Please." That word doesn't come out of nowhere. I called again. And again. And again. The number climbed without me noticing. 20. I felt ridiculous standing there, grown man in a quiet apartment, talking to voicemail like it could hear me. I told myself not to panic. Told myself families were complicated, that I didn't know what I'd heard, that it was probably nothing. That's what I'd been trained to do. Minimize. Rationalize. Stay in my lane. My phone buzzed. For half a heartbeat, hope surged. It was an email reminder about a deadline. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that surprised me. I called her mother next. Voicemail. I tried her parents' house. The landline rang longer than it should have. When someone finally picked up, their voice was casual, almost bored. "She's fine," my mother-in-law said after I stumbled through an explanation. "You're overreacting." I heard her say, "She's a kid. Kids get dramatic." The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling something settle in my gut. Not fear exactly. Recognition. I'd felt this before. That quiet pressure to stand down. To trust the adults. To not make a scene. I looked at the clock. Then at my phone. 47 missed calls. I didn't remember making most of them. I grabbed my keys. As I locked the door behind me, a thought slipped in, unwanted and sharp. If I'm wrong, I'll look crazy. I pushed it aside. Another thought followed, heavier. If I'm right, I'll never forgive myself. The elevator ride down felt endless. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the car, I sat there for a moment with the engine off, phone on the passenger seat, daring it to light up. It didn't. I started the car. As I pulled onto the road, I told myself I was just checking. Just being careful. Just doing what a good father should. But deep down, under the excuses and the practiced calm, I knew something had already changed. I wasn't driving to confirm my fears. I was driving because a part of me had finally stopped asking for permission. And whatever waited at the end of that road, I could feel it pressing closer with every mile. I had almost ignored the call. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just keeps dialing. I don't remember sitting down, but somehow I was back in my apartment, phone in my hand, staring at the screen like it might change its mind. Like if I waited long enough, it would light up and explain everything away. It didn't. I called again. Bring. No answer. I started pacing. From the couch to the window. From the window back to the door. The room felt smaller every time the call went unanswered. My thoughts kept trying to organize themselves, to create order where there was none. She's probably asleep. Someone took the phone away. You misheard. Each explanation lasted about 3 seconds before collapsing under the sound of her voice in my head. Please. I checked the call log. 8 missed calls. Then 12. I didn't remember pressing redial that many times, but my thumb kept moving on its own, like muscle memory had taken over. I sent another text. Please call me. I'm worried. Nothing. I tried her mother again. Voicemail. Her recorded voice was cheerful, upbeat, like a stranger. I hung up before the beep finished. I stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air after each ring. My reflection in the microwave door looked older than I remembered. Tired. Hollow-eyed. Like someone who'd been practicing calm for too long. I thought about the last time I'd seen my daughter. The way she'd hugged me tighter than usual at drop-off. The way she'd asked almost casually when I'd be picking her up next time. I hadn't thought much of it then. I thought of it now. The phone buzzed. My heart jumped so hard it hurt. It was a calendar notification. I swiped it away with more force than necessary. My breathing was shallow now, chest tight, like I'd been running without moving. I called the house again. This time, my mother-in-law answered on the 3rd ring. What? She said. I heard something, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded thin. On the video call. She sounded scared. There was a pause. I could hear the TV in the background. Laughter. A sitcom laugh track. She's fine, she said. You're overreacting. She said. She says things. My mother-in-law cut in. You know how kids are. Don't make this into something it isn't. What about her phone? I asked. Why isn't she answering? Another pause. Shorter this time. It probably died. The line went dead. I stared at the phone like it had betrayed me. I tried the house again. No answer. That's when the numbers stopped feeling abstract. 23 missed calls. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, phone dangling in my hand. My mind started replaying moments from my own childhood, uninvited and sharp. The way adults closed ranks. The way concern was treated like disrespect. Don't question. Don't exaggerate. Don't embarrass the family. I'd learned those rules early. Learned how to swallow discomfort and call it maturity. Learned how to stay quiet and convince myself it was strength. My daughter hadn't learned that yet. And maybe that's what scared me most. I stood up and started packing without really deciding to. Phone charger. Jacket. 'Cause I moved fast, like if I slowed down, doubt would catch up. I checked the call log again. 31. I tried my ex one more time as I pulled on my shoes. Voicemail again. I left a message this time. My voice shook, but I didn't hide it. Something's wrong, I said. I'm going to your parents' house. Call me. I hung up and immediately felt the weight of what I'd just done. The unspoken accusation. The line I'd crossed. The phone buzzed again. Nothing. I locked the door behind me and stood in the hallway for a second, listening to the hum of the building. Someone laughed somewhere above me. An elevator dinged. Life uninterrupted. I checked the call log in the elevator. 47 missed calls. The number looked unreal, like a glitch. In the parking garage, I sat in the car with the engine off, phone resting on the passenger seat. I stared at it, willing it to light up, to save me from whatever I was about to do. It stayed dark. I thought about how many times I'd told myself I didn't want to be that parent. The dramatic one. The difficult one. The one who made everyone uncomfortable. I thought about the cost of that choice. I started the car. As I pulled out of the garage, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief. Not peace. Just clarity. If I was wrong, I'd apologize. If I was right, I'd act. Either way, I wasn't hanging up again. The road ahead stretched out, dark and empty, headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the night. My phone sat silent beside me, each unanswered call echoing louder than the last. I didn't know what I was driving toward. But with every mile, one truth pressed harder against my chest. Whatever happened next would decide the kind of man my daughter would remember. And I wasn't going to let silence answer for me. The road was empty in a way that felt intentional, like the night itself was making room for what I couldn't outrun. Once I merged onto the highway, the city fell away behind me. Streetlights thinned out. Buildings gave way to darkness and long, unbroken stretches of asphalt. The dashboard clock glowed in unforgiving blue. 3 hours. That's what the GPS said. 3 hours to either confirm I was losing my mind, or prove I hadn't been losing it fast enough. My phone lay face up on the passenger seat. Silent. Every few seconds, my eyes flicked toward it anyway, like it might surprise me. It didn't. I tried the house again. Straight to ringing. I hung up before it could finish. I didn't want to hear another unanswered call stack itself onto the others. The speedometer crept higher than usual. I didn't notice until my hands started to ache from gripping the wheel too tightly. I loosened them, forced myself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The kind of breathing you learn when you're trying to keep things from spilling over. The farther I drove, the quieter my thoughts became. Not calm, focused. Fear narrowed into something sharper. Useful. And then, without warning, the memories started. They always wait for silence. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting at a kitchen table that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. My grandfather stood over me, his shadow cutting across the floor. He wasn't yelling. He never yelled. That was the trick of it. He spoke softly, like patience was a virtue he owned. Sit still, he'd said. I had. I remembered my mother later, smoothing my hair, telling me he meant well. Telling me I was sensitive. Telling me not to make things bigger than they were. I hadn't thought of that in years. The road curved, and my headlights caught the reflective eyes of something small darting back into the trees. I flinched, heart jumping, then laughed quietly at myself. Get it together. I told myself I was projecting. That I was dragging my own unfinished business into a situation I didn't understand. That I was turning a child's fear into a monster because I needed something to fight. But even as I told myself that, another memory surfaced. My daughter, a few months ago, standing at the edge of the living room while her grandparents visited. The way she'd stayed close to me, fingers hooked into my belt loop. The way she'd gone quiet when my grandfather tried to hug her goodbye. I'd noticed. I'd filed it away under kids go through phases. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't ignored the signs. I'd labeled them. The phone buzzed. my breath caught. I glanced down so fast the car drifted slightly before I corrected it. My heart was already racing, already braced for relief. It was a text from my ex. "What's going on?" I exhaled hard, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. I dictated a reply without thinking, words tumbling out too fast. "I'm driving to your parents' house." She called me scared. I couldn't reach anyone. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "You're probably overthinking this," she wrote. They would have told me if something was wrong. I stared at the message until the words blurred. That phrase again. Overthinking. It was the polite version of stand down. I didn't respond. I kept driving. Mile markers slid past in steady intervals. The radio came on at some point, low and crackling, before I shut it off again. I didn't want anyone else's voice in my head. I thought about the man I'd been trying to be since the divorce. Stable. Reasonable. Easy to work with. The kind of father no one could accuse of being difficult. I thought about how much of that identity was built around not making waves. A memory surfaced of my grandfather at a family gathering, hand on my shoulder, voice light as he told a story that made everyone laugh. I remembered the way the room bent around him. The authority he carried without asking for it. I remembered how no one ever questioned him. The road narrowed as I exited the highway, trees pressing in closer now. The GPS recalculated, guiding me down smaller roads I didn't recognize. My phone remained stubbornly silent. I tried the house one more time. No answer. I didn't hang up right away. I let it ring, listening to the sound echo in my ear. Each ring felt heavier than the last, like it was marking time. I thought about my daughter's voice again. The way it had cracked. The way she'd said please like she was negotiating for something she wasn't supposed to ask for. A wave of anger rolled through me, hot and sudden. Not explosive, controlled. The kind that clears your vision instead of clouding it. I realized something then, somewhere on a dark stretch of road with no other cars in sight. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about being right. It was about what I was willing to risk. If I turned around now, if I decided it was all too uncertain, too inconvenient, too messy, I would be teaching my daughter a lesson I'd spent my whole life unlearning. That silence is safer than confrontation. That comfort is more important than truth. The porch light of a farmhouse flickered past in the distance. The smell of wet earth drifted in through a cracked window. Somewhere ahead, my daughter was waiting. Or sleeping. Or crying. The not knowing gnawed at me. I thought about the way men in my family handled things. How they absorbed discomfort and called it strength. How they protected the family name even when it came at a cost. I'd inherited that reflex without realizing it. Until tonight. The road curved again, and I slowed as the GPS announced my next turn. My hands were steady now. My breathing even. I didn't feel brave. I felt decided. As the trees thinned and the familiar outline of the neighborhood came into view, a single thought anchored itself in my chest, solid and immovable. Whatever waited for me at the end of this drive, I wasn't going to explain it away. I wasn't going to soften it. I wasn't going to stay quiet. The headlights swept across a row of houses, then slowed. I was almost there. And for the first time all night, the fear took a step back, not because the danger had passed, but because I was finally driving straight toward it. I knew something was wrong before I even parked the car. The house looked the same as it always had. Same pale siding. Same wide porch. Same porch light casting a dull yellow circle onto the wet steps. If you drove past without slowing down, you'd think it was just another quiet house at the edge of town, tucked away from the world. But my chest tightened the moment I saw her. She was sitting on the porch. Not standing. Not pacing. Sitting. Small shoulders hunched forward, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear into the fabric of her jacket. Her hair was damp, clinging to her face in dark strands. Rain tapped softly against the wood around her, steady and patient. She didn't move when my headlights swept across the yard. I slammed the car into park and was out of the door before the engine fully died. "Hey," I said, already crossing the grass. My voice came out lower than I expected, steady in a way I didn't feel. "Hey, sweetheart." She looked up. Relief washed across her face so fast it broke something in me. Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. She just stared at me like she needed to make sure I was real. I dropped to my knees in front of her, ignoring the rain soaking through my jeans. I took her face gently in my hands, checking her the way parents do without thinking. Arms. Shoulders. No visible injuries. "You're okay," I said, more to myself than to her. "You're okay." She nodded once. Then she whispered, "Daddy, please don't look inside." The words landed with a quiet finality. I froze. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. "Talk to me." She shook her head, eyes darting toward the front door. The light behind us flickered as the rain picked up. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. I tried to be quiet. That sentence hurt more than anything else could have. "Hey," I said, brushing wet hair back from her face. "You didn't do anything wrong." She pressed her forehead against my chest. Her body was trembling now, the kind of shaking that comes after the danger has passed, when the adrenaline finally lets go. I wrapped my arms around her and held her there, feeling how small she felt in my arms. Feeling how fast her heart was beating. I looked past her toward the door. It was closed. The windows were dark. No movement inside. "Where is everyone?" I asked. She didn't answer. I didn't push. I shrugged out of my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was too big, swallowed her whole, and that felt right somehow. Like armor. "We're going to the car," I said. "Okay." She hesitated. "I don't want to leave you," she said. The irony almost took my breath away. "I'm right here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." I scooped her up carefully. She wrapped her arms around my neck, clinging tighter than she ever had before. Her hands were cold. There was a faint metallic smell under the rain, sharp and unmistakable, and I forced myself not to think about it. As I carried her toward the car, she buried her face in my shoulder. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "He told me not to tell." My jaw clenched. "Who?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I buckled her into the passenger seat, then paused. I looked at her hands. There were faint reddish smudges near her wrists, washed thin by rain and time. Not enough to explain. Enough to matter. My hands shook as I closed the door. I stood there for a moment, rain soaking through my shirt, staring at the house. The porch light hummed. The door stayed closed. I thought about walking inside. About seeing for myself. About confronting whatever waited beyond that door. Then I looked back at my daughter. She was watching me through the windshield, eyes wide, pleading without words. "Please don't." I opened the driver's door and got in. The car smelled like rain and fear. I started the engine and pulled away from the house slowly, half expecting someone to come running out after us. No one did. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, steady and hypnotic. My heart was still pounding, but my thoughts were sharp now, focused. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. She nodded. "Did anyone hurt you?" She hesitated, then shrugged. A small, uncertain motion. "He got mad," she said. I didn't listen fast enough. The words were simple. Casual. They shouldn't have been. I swallowed hard. "Did he touch you?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "No. He just grabbed me." And he yelled. But I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't trust myself to look at her. "I got scared," she said quietly. "And then you were gone." The sentence hit harder than any accusation. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have stayed." She reached out and touched my arm, tentative. "You came," she said. That was when I understood something. This wasn't about what I'd find inside that house. It was about what I did next. I drove past the end of the street and didn't slow down. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, a line drew itself in my mind, clear and irreversible. Between what my family had always accepted and what I would never accept again. I didn't know yet who I would have to confront, or what it would cost me. But I knew this. I wasn't carrying my daughter back into that silence. The road opened up ahead of us, dark and empty, and for the first time since the call dropped, my hands stopped shaking. Not because the danger was over. but because I'd finally chosen a side. We didn't go far. I drove until the house was out of sight, then another mile beyond that, like distance alone could keep the past from catching up. I pulled over beneath a stand of trees where the road dipped and the rain softened into a steady whisper against the windshield. My daughter had fallen quiet. Not asleep, just still. The kind of stillness that listens. I turned the engine off. The silence pressed in immediately. "You're safe," I said, even though no one had asked. "We're not going back tonight." She nodded, eyes on her hands. I watched her for a moment, then reached over and took her fingers gently, one by one, grounding myself in the simple fact that she was here. Breathing. My phone buzzed. I didn't jump this time. It was my ex. "Where are you?" I stared at the screen, weighing every possible response. I typed, erased, typed again. "I have her. She's with me. We're safe." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. What happened? I looked at my daughter. She was watching me now, careful, like she didn't want to interrupt something important. "I'll explain," I typed. But not over text. The dots vanished. A few seconds later, the phone rang. I stepped out of the car to take it, rain soaking my hair, grounding me in the cold. I leaned against the hood, staring into the dark trees as I answered. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" she demanded. "I tried," I said. "You didn't answer." The pause. "She didn't say anything to me," she said. "They would have told me." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "They didn't." I told her what I'd heard, what I'd seen, what her daughter had said. I didn't embellish. I didn't soften it either. I stuck to the facts, letting the silence between sentences do the rest of the work. "She was scared," I said. "That's enough for me." "She's dramatic sometimes," my ex said. "You know that." I closed my eyes. "So was I," I said. "That didn't make me wrong." She didn't respond right away. "What are you suggesting?" she finally asked. "I'm suggesting she doesn't go back there," I said. "Not without supervision. Not until we understand what happened." "That's going to cause problems," she said. "I know." Another pause. Longer this time. "You always do this," she said. "You make things bigger than they need to be." The words slid off me. "Maybe," I said. "But tonight, making it smaller isn't an option." I hung up before the conversation could circle back into familiar territory. I stayed outside for a moment, rain running down my face, letting the anger move through me without taking control. It wasn't explosive. It was steady, focused. When I got back in the car, my daughter looked up at me. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. "You're not in trouble. None of this is your fault." She considered that. "They said not to make a big deal," she said. Of course they did. I reached over and brushed my thumb against her knuckles. "Sometimes," I said, choosing my words carefully, "adults say that when they don't want to be uncomfortable." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that away. We sat there for a few minutes, the rain filling the space between us. My thoughts drifted back to the house we'd left behind. To the door I hadn't opened. Part of me still wanted to go back. To confront him. To hear him explain. Apologize. Deny. But another part of me, the one that had been growing louder all night, knew better. This wasn't about a single confrontation. It was about a system. I'd grown up watching men in my family avoid certain conversations. Not because they didn't matter, but because they threatened the image we worked so hard to maintain. Respectable. Disciplined. In control. We didn't talk about fear. We didn't talk about crossed lines. We definitely didn't talk about men who made children uncomfortable. We talked about loyalty, privacy, handling things internally. I understood now what those words were really for. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I hesitated before answering. "What's going on?" she asked, worry and irritation tangled together. "I picked her up," I said. "She's with me." "Why would you do that?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what kind of mess you're making?" I laughed softly. I couldn't help it. "I do," I said. "I've been part of it my whole life." There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. "You're overreacting," she said. "Your grandfather would never." "Don't I said. My voice was calm, but it carried weight now. Don't finish that sentence. Silence. She was afraid, I continued. And when a child is afraid of an adult, we pay attention. Or we fail them. You're accusing him of something terrible, my mother said. I'm accusing all of us of not listening, I said. She started to argue. To explain. To protect. I ended the call. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was grief. Grief for the version of my family I'd wanted to believe in. Grief for the years I'd spent mistaking silence for strength. My daughter reached over and took my hand. You're doing the right thing, she said, unsure but sincere. The simplicity of it nearly broke me. I squeezed her hand back. I know, I said. And for the first time, I meant it. I started the car. As we pulled back onto the road, I felt the weight of what was coming. The conversations. The accusations. The fallout. This choice would cost me. I would be judged. Questioned. Isolated. But I'd already made peace with that. Because the cost of doing nothing had finally become clear. Men in my family didn't talk about these things. I was going to. And once you say certain things out loud, there's no going back. The road stretched ahead of us, slick and shining under the headlights. My daughter leaned back in her seat, eyelids heavy now, exhaustion finally catching up. I drove on, steady and awake, knowing that the hardest part wasn't behind me. It was waiting. And this time, I wasn't going to look away. Morning came without permission. The sky lightened slowly, a thin gray seeping through the edges of the night as if the world was pretending nothing had happened. I hadn't slept. I'd driven until my daughter's breathing evened out, until her head tipped gently toward the window and exhaustion finally won. I parked outside a 24-hour diner and let the engine idle, watching the steam rise from my coffee like it was trying to escape something. This was the hour when doubt liked to make its case. When adrenaline faded and consequences stepped forward, clearing their throat. I looked at my daughter sleeping beside me. Her face was relaxed now, lashes resting against her cheeks, hands tucked into the sleeves of my jacket. In sleep, she looked younger. Softer. Like the night hadn't aged her. I knew if I drove back, if I handed her over with enough apologies and explanations, most people would let it end there. Quietly. Conveniently. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was the moment. Not the porch. Not the drive. Not the arguments. I stepped out of the car and walked a few paces away, the morning air sharp in my lungs. The parking lot was nearly empty. A delivery truck rumbled past on the road, indifferent to my crisis. I called. The voice on the other end was calm, practiced. Trained not to react. I explained what had happened. Slowly. Carefully. I stuck to facts, the way I'd learned to do in meetings and negotiations. I described the call. The fear in her voice. The unanswered phone. The way she'd been left outside alone. There was a pause. Then questions. Names. Addresses. Relationships. Each answer felt like I was setting something heavy down, piece by piece. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid. Because I understood what I'd just done. I walked back to the car and sat there for a long moment, forehead resting against the steering wheel. The finality of it pressed in on me. There would be no taking this back. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Max, where are you? I closed my eyes. I called her. You called someone, didn't you? She said as soon as she answered. Yes, I said. You didn't even talk to me first, she said, anger sharp and familiar. You always do this. You decide on your own and then expect everyone else to fall in line. I decided because no one else would, I said. My voice was steady. Because she was scared, and that was enough. You've just blown this up, she said. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my parents? I pictured my daughter's face on the porch. The way she'd said, please don't look inside. Yes, I said. I do. Silence stretched between us. She needs stability, my ex said finally. Not chaos. She needs safety, I said. Everything else is negotiable. She exhaled sharply. You're overstepping, she said. I'm stepping up, I said. The line went quiet. Then softer. What happens now? She asked. I looked back at the car. She stays with me, I said. For now. Until we know more. That's not what we agreed, she said. No, I said. But it's what's happening. When the call ended, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not because the situation was resolved, but because the pretending was. I drove us to my apartment just as the city was waking up. Commuters moved through crosswalks, coffee cups in hand, eyes forward. The world had no idea what had cracked open overnight. Inside, I made her a bed on the couch and tucked her in gently. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. Are we home? She asked. For a little while, I said. She nodded and went back to sleep. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Family, friends, messages layered with concern and accusation, wrapped in polite language. You should have waited. This could ruin him. You're tearing the family apart. I didn't respond. I watched my daughter sleep instead. Later that day, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find two people standing there, faces neutral, voices calm. They asked to come in. They asked questions. They took notes. My daughter stayed close to me, hand gripping my shirt. I didn't let go. When they left, the apartment felt too quiet. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, knees drawn up, and finally let myself feel it. The fear. The anger. The grief. I thought about how easy it would have been to do nothing. To convince myself it wasn't my place. To wait for proof, for permission, for someone else to lead. I thought about how many men I knew who had done exactly that, and called it patience. My daughter came and sat beside me, leaning into my shoulder. Are we okay? She asked. I wrapped my arm around her. We will be, I said. And this time, it wasn't a promise meant to soothe. It was a decision already in motion. That night, as she slept in the next room, I stood alone in the kitchen, city lights flickering through the window. My phone was face down on the counter. I knew tomorrow would bring more questions. More consequences. More people telling me I'd gone too far. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring my choices by how comfortable they made everyone else. I was measuring them by one thing. Whether my daughter felt safe enough to sleep. That decision changed everything. And there was no version of my life where I would undo it. The cost didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. Small at first. Easy to dismiss. A pause before someone answered the phone. A message left on read. Conversations that ended a little too quickly, like people were afraid of saying the wrong thing, or the right one. I went back to work 2 days later. Not because I was ready, but because life doesn't stop just because yours cracks open. I sat at my desk, eyes on the screen, watching emails stack up while my mind stayed somewhere else entirely. Every notification felt intrusive. Every meeting felt pointless. People knew. They didn't say it outright, but I could feel it in the way they looked at me. Curiosity wrapped in professionalism. Sympathy edged with judgment. One coworker stopped by my desk and cleared his throat. Heard you've got a lot going on, he said. I nodded. Family stuff, he added, as if naming it might make it smaller. Yeah, I said. Family stuff. He lingered for a second, then leaned in slightly. You know, he said quietly, sometimes it's better not to escalate things. These situations have a way of sorting themselves out. I looked up at him. Do they? I asked. He didn't answer. He just nodded awkwardly and walked away. By the end of the week, the unspoken had started to solidify. A project I'd been leading was reassigned, temporarily. A meeting I usually ran happened without me. No one said it was because of what I'd done. No one had to. At home, the fallout was louder. My phone rang constantly. Messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly resurfaced, all carrying the same theme wrapped in different words. You went too far. You could have handled this privately. Do you know what you've done to him? They spoke about him like he was the only one who mattered. Like his discomfort outweighed her fear. I stopped responding. Silence, it turned out, worked both ways. My mother showed up unannounced one evening. She stood in my doorway, arms crossed, eyes scanning the apartment like she was looking for evidence of damage. You've turned everyone against us, she said. I didn't invite her in. No, I said. I stopped protecting what shouldn't be protected. She shook her head, frustrated. You don't understand what you've done, she said. This family. I understand exactly what it costs, I said. I've been paying it my whole life. She looked past me into the apartment, where my daughter was sitting on the couch with a book, knees tucked up, reading quietly. She looks fine, my mother said. I followed her gaze. She is, I said. Because I listened. My mother's mouth tightened. This will follow you, she warned. People won't forget. I know, I said. She waited for more. For regret. For hesitation. It didn't come. She left without saying goodbye. That night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat alone in the dark and let the weight of it settle. The loss of approval. The quiet distancing. The realization that some relationships only survive if you agree not to see too clearly. I grieved them. Not because I wanted them back, but because I finally saw them for what they were. In the days that followed, routines formed. I packed lunches, walked her to school, sat in the car a little longer at drop-off, making sure she went inside smiling before I drove away. At night, she started talking again. Not about what happened, not directly, but about small things. Friends, a story she was reading, something funny a teacher had said. One evening as I tucked her in, she hesitated. Daddy. Yeah. You're not mad at me, right? The question hollowed me out. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hands in mine. No, I said firmly. I'm proud of you. She searched my face, looking for cracks. You didn't ruin anything, I added. You showed me what mattered. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. After she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the apartment. The kind of quiet that feels earned. I thought about the man I'd been trying to be before all of this. Competent. Agreeable. And I thought about the man I was becoming. One who could be misunderstood. One who could be judged. One who could lose things. The cost was real. But so was the clarity. I didn't know what the future held, how this would resolve, who would stay, who would walk away. What I did know was this. Every morning my daughter woke up in my home without fear, the price felt smaller. Every night she slept without locking herself inside, it felt worth it. The world might remember me as difficult. My family might remember me as disloyal. But when I looked at her, safe, steady, learning to trust again, I knew exactly who I was. And for the first time, that was enough. Morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and tentative. I woke first, as usual, and watched my daughter sleep for a few moments. The rise and fall of her chest, the faint murmur of dreams escaping her lips, it was ordinary, and yet it was everything. A miracle forged from chaos, fear, and the choices I had made. The apartment smelled like toast and coffee. She had helped herself into the kitchen before I got there, small feet padding quietly across the floor. She turned, smiling when she saw me. "Good morning, Daddy," she said. Her voice was lighter now. The fear that had shadowed her face for weeks, the tension in her shoulders and hands, had begun to melt. I realized that for the first time, she didn't see the world as something dangerous waiting for her to fail. She saw it as a place where she could be safe, and I had a part in that. I poured my coffee, and she climbed onto the counter to reach for her favorite mug. We didn't talk about the past few days. Not yet. We didn't need to. Recovery isn't built on words alone. It's built on presence, on stability, on knowing that the people who love you will not abandon you in moments of fear. We spent the morning like that, slow, deliberate. Breakfast, laughter over spilled cereal, the quiet joy of being together without crisis pressing down on us. I noticed how much her confidence was returning. She asked questions, shared little observations, and even teased me in the way she always had before the night that changed everything. Later, we walked to school together. My daughter, hand in mine, skipping lightly across the sidewalk. She looked over her shoulder at me and grinned. "Daddy," she said, "I'm glad you came." I squeezed her hand. "I'll always come," I said. It wasn't just a promise, it was a rule I had rewritten for myself. One that no one else could dictate. The rest of the world, judgments, family pressure, colleagues, hadn't disappeared. But their weight mattered less because I had chosen my compass, and it pointed firmly toward protecting her. By mid-afternoon, the apartment was quiet again. She was doing homework, focused and calm. I sat across from her, reviewing a few work emails I could no longer ignore, but my mind kept drifting. I reflected on how life had changed in the span of a week, the calls I made, the decisions I took, the doors I refused to open. I realized that I had reclaimed something essential. I had reclaimed my voice, my authority as a father, and my right to act decisively when it mattered most. There were still challenges ahead. Conversations I had postponed, relationships strained by my choices, and the inevitable tension with the adults who believed I'd overstepped. But none of that diminished what we had created together, an environment where my daughter could thrive without fear, and where I could finally measure my actions against my own conscience rather than someone else's expectations. Evenings came gently now. We cooked together, laughed over small mistakes, and told each other stories about our day. The kind of ordinary magic that once felt unattainable. I watched her curl up with a book, the corners of her mouth lifting in genuine amusement at something she read. It was a quiet victory, subtle and unannounced, yet profoundly significant. As I tucked her in that night, she looked at me with those wide, trusting eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of everything I had fought for. Relief, gratitude, and the knowledge that the choices I had made, the hard, lonely choices, had not been in vain. I kissed her forehead and held her close for a long moment. When I finally stepped back, I felt a sense of completion. Not finality, but balance. The life we reclaimed wasn't free of problems or challenges. It wouldn't always be easy, but it was ours, forged through courage, clarity, and the unyielding commitment to act when it mattered. I turned off the lights and left the room quietly, closing the door behind me. I paused for a moment in the hallway, listening to the soft, steady breathing from her room. I smiled, a calm, resolute smile that came from the depths of exhaustion and triumph. This night, like all nights after that storm, was ours. And as long as I stayed awake, stayed present, and stayed committed, we would continue to reclaim the ordinary, precious, and fragile life that fear had almost taken from us. I sat in the living room for a while, hands folded, heart quiet but alert, letting the peace of the moment settle in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but the foundation was solid. And for the first time in a long time, I understood what it meant to be truly present, truly protective, and truly myself. The storm had passed, not because it disappeared, but because we chose to face it together. And that choice, the conscious, unwavering decision to act, to protect, and to reclaim, was the quiet victory that would carry us forward.